I'm just going to give a few bits of housekeeping and let attendees know what the structure of the event is going to look like before passing on and getting going. So I'm really excited to welcome everyone to this event for London Climate Action Week. And we're going to be answering the question of what can communities learn from the COVID-19 crisis response to help inspire climate action. And my colleagues will be giving a sort of short intro in a moment to the event itself, but a few words on housekeeping first. So we will, number one, we'll be sending out an email after the event to all attendees with a recording and also signposts to all of the kind of relevant areas mentioned in the course of the conversation this morning. So look out for that next week. And second thing, please ask all the questions you can in the chat box. We really want to have a rich Q&A, so do put plenty of queries in there. An overview of today's event. On your screen, you can see three of my Semble colleagues. Can you see three of my Semble colleagues? Two at the moment. So that's Amanda and Dominica. And my third colleague, Kia, will be joining us in a moment. You can also see some of our panelists, that is Farhana Yamin from Camden Think and Do, Julie Parish from Octopus, and Afsheen Rashid will be joining us until 10:15. And then Minister Powell from DEFRA will be joining us towards the end of the event. We also have Sarah Taylor from Natural England. So each panellist will respond to the title question, and then we'll head into a chunky Q&A section, and then have a kind of short reflection on the session so far before having kind of 15 minutes with Minister Powell for some Q&As. And in the midst of all of that, we'll be sending over a poll for all attendees to get involved in. Now, I'm going to hand over to Amanda, Semble's Chief Exec, for an intro to Semble and today's event.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so excited, as is Lorna and everyone, about the fantastic lineup that we have today. But I did just want to start by giving you a little bit about Semble. So we're a social enterprise, and our purpose is all about driving positive change from the grassroots up, which is why we're so interested in community climate action. So Semble used to be called Project Dirt, and we were actually founded about 10 years ago by Mark Shearer and Nick Gardner, who were really driven to increase environmental sustainability. So they set up a green social network connecting thousands of environmental projects, which started in London and then spread across the whole country. And as we grew, we started to embrace a wider variety of organisations, and we became a community network, and actually last year changed our name from Project Dirt to Semble. So with our history firmly rooted in the environment and in London, we're really delighted to be part of this London Climate Action Week. So welcome to the week. Now, through this network that we have, we see amazing work being done by community groups across the UK, from food rescue schemes to community energy groups, repair cafes, and we absolutely know the really important role that grassroots action is already playing in repairing and reducing the effects of climate crisis, but obviously there's loads to be done. We've also been working on our own campaigns to support the next generation to engage in the natural world through their local schools, getting millions of kids across the globe learning and playing in nature through Outdoor Classroom Day with the help of Unilever. Here in the UK, we have a campaign called Backyard Nature, which has also been engaging kids in climate action, encouraging them to really support biodiversity on their doorstep. And through that campaign, we've seen a 50% increase in children looking for actionable nature activities during lockdown, which is not surprising. But we've been totally blown away by this surge in support for hyper-local action, from key stakeholders really recognising the importance of community action and the massive uplift in individuals getting involved in local action for the first time, and even people shopping local for the first time, and hopefully starting a habit that will endure. We really, really want community groups to grow stronger because they're going to be such a vital part of the post-COVID world. Our mission is to connect grassroots organisations with businesses who want to be part of real local change. And what we want is for the businesses to provide the resources to support this. So our role is a connector between businesses and community groups. One of our founders, Nick, he's on the call, I think, and he's gone on to head up climate action at the National Lottery Community Fund. And he's managing a fund to support communities taking climate action. It's a bit later in the year, so make sure you bookmark the climate action section of the lottery website for when that fund goes live later this year. Now, clearly the challenge for today is to work out what we can do to ensure that we make a really good green recovery, building back better with community action at the heart of society. And I'm sure we're going to hear some great stuff about that from the panelists that we've got today. So I'm now going to hand over to Keir, who's going to introduce the panelists.
Thank you, Amanda. So we've got an amazing panel today. Afsheen Rashid is a community energy specialist working at both local and national level. She's pioneered Lambeth Council's Community Energy Programme, was a policy advisor at the Department of Energy and Climate, and is chair of Brixton Energy and Community Energy England. She was instrumental in setting up the Muslim Women's Collective in Tower Hamlets, seeking to empower women to play an active role in improving the environment. In 2011, Afsheen co-founded Repowering London, an organisation that empowers local communities to develop community-owned renewable energy projects with particular focus on deprived inner-city social housing estates. In 2016, she was awarded an MBE for work delivering renewable energy to deprived London communities, and in 2018, she won the Region Clean Energy Pioneer Award. So thank you so much for joining us, Afsheen. We've got Farhana Yamin from Camden Think and Do. She's an international climate change lawyer, author and activist. She's worked on international treaties, including the Paris Climate Agreement, and has been instrumental in linking climate and development policy. She's involved in Extinction Rebellion's strategic team, and last year glued herself to Shell's London office in non-violent direct action. More recently, she's established Camden Think and Do, a hub for local community to connect with stakeholders and collectively reimagine a green future in line with the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. We also have Julie Parish from Octopus Community Network in Islington. She has a wealth of experience in designing and implementing community-based social action and learning projects. She's led on the partnership development and business plan production for 6 European Regional Development Fund projects, as well as various international energy agency-backed schemes. Julie is part of the team in Renova, a social enterprise that develops partnerships to support youth, employability, culture and enterprise, and is the development director for the Octopus Community Network. Octopus is a network that brings 14 different community centres in Islington together to support collaboration and community cohesion. They've also got an urban growing project, and recently have been delivering food to vulnerable people self-isolating as a result of COVID-19. We are also joined by Sarah Taylor from Natural England. Sarah Taylor is a specialist in nature conservation and climate change adaptation. She's a senior specialist at Natural England, a public body that advises DEFRA, the Department for Energy, can't remember the acronym now, for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, responsible for protecting and improving England's biodiversity, as well as helping people enjoy, access and understand the natural environment. Sarah works on climate vulnerability assessments at a national level. She's also involved in climate change adaptation within Natural England. And we will later be joined by Rebecca Powell, the Minister at DEFRA and Conservative MP for Taunton, Deane and Somerset. We'll give her a quick intro when she joins us a little later. So I will now hand over to Domi, who's going to lead a quick Q&A with our panelists.
Thank you, Keir. Yeah, we're very excited to have all the great panellists here with us today. So I want to hand over to them without further ado to respond to the title of the webinar and to introduce a little bit more about the work that they do. So first we've got Farhana, who will tell us a little bit more about Camden Think and Do and her view on what communities can learn from the COVID response and how can that help inspire climate action. Lorna's going to share her screen, I think, at this stage to put up a slide, if that works. But over to you, Farhana, for about 4 minutes, if that's okay.
Thank you, and thank you for the lovely introduction, and to Semble, who I did know was Project Dirt, but I hadn't made the connection, and you know, so it's fantastic to also know that you're based in Camden, where I'm sort of, you know, putting down deeper roots. I've lived here for about 30 years, but actually a lot of my work, which you sort of summarized, you know, took me, you know, very globally, and to be part of the UN negotiations and to do a lot of policy work and to do academic and research work. And I'm describing that a little bit because part of my frustration and sort of realization that, you know, what were we called to do in this moment of climate emergency last year was to have a very radical rethink personally about the work that I did in the UN, and also to have a real sort of you know, sort of wake up moment as to what was needed, and that led me to, you know, join the rebellion. I'm you know, active, but I'm no longer the strategy lead. I've stepped back, partly exhaustion, partly to focus on other things, including the work at Camden Think and Do. And I think where we are in history is really to understand that actually a lot of the changes that we need to make have to be rooted in a very strong, in a very thick sense of partnership and community with other citizens, with other players, and in the localities in which we live. So the hyper-local, you know, understanding is what's given rise to the Camden Think and Do space, which came from a series of discussions we had about what was necessary to move forward on the climate crisis that we were having in Camden sort of this time last year, when Camden set up its citizens' assembly process in response to, you know, a lot of the protests that were going on. And I think it's a model for, you know, community space, a new kind of way in which we can kind of come together in more informal ways than is possible, you know, in a council meeting or in strictly your own, you know, formal institutional work, or in your NGO. So it's a sort of hub, you know, it's a pop-up, deliberately light touch, temporary sort of space to do that. Moving quickly on to what have we learned? We've learned that there's a huge thirst for people to have spaces to meet, and that local spaces are absolutely necessary and are actually available. There's huge numbers of buildings at any one time that are underused or not used at all, whether it's for a month or 3 months or 6 months. And this is, I'm just talking about council buildings, but also now, especially as a result of COVID, we have a huge number of underutilized buildings as a result of the recession and as a result of the safety procedures, which could allow for many different kinds of players to make use of those spaces for hubs. And our shop, which is in the top window, you can see in Kentish Town High Street, you know, was used for, especially for March and April, by a number of groups and a number of individuals who organized their own mutual aid schemes, and they needed places. They needed a place to store all the food, all the deliveries, all the stuff that was being donated to them. So literally not having that space was, you know, a factor that would have hampered that work. We also helped other groups who were starting up their own efforts to deliver care packages and so forth. And then during COVID, we organized a huge number of online events to get over the loneliness, to get over the need for connection, to get over the just cancel my 4-minute timer. And I think what we can learn from COVID right now is there is a thirst for community-based, hyper-local connectivity, and that actually we have got ways in which we can bring together social action, social justice, climate action, climate justice, greening, wilding, food waste, farming, fast fashion. We organise seminars and all of these things in the last 3 or 4 months, and that can continue. There's a thirst for wanting to be hyperlocal, and I feel that that's the biggest single gain, as it were, from what we've learnt during the last 4 months now. 5 feels like 5 or 6, but it's since March. And I think moving forward, we've got a new premise, which is just the other photo where you see that newly laid patch of earth is actually a wild meadow that was sown last week without permission from the council. We just went there and said, we're going to turn, the bit of green in this car park into a wild meadow and water it through that very hot week. And I think that greening spaces and running these kind of community endeavours is the way in which we're going to draw down the bad power and kickstart a new kind of collaborative sharing gift-based economy, which returns value primarily to the people at source where they are. So thanks very much for that little, I think I went over by a minute.
That's fine. It was so fascinating to hear everything that you're doing, and I'm sure, well, my mind goes to a million and one places. We've got lots of questions, and just for our participants, just as a reminder, we've got the chat function, and if you've got any questions for Farhana or any of the other panellists, please post them there and we'll be monitoring them, and there's going to be a chance to ask all the questions later on. But for now, over to Sarah to introduce more about her work and her response.
Hi. Thanks for having me here. It's great to be here amongst such amazing people. So yeah, I think just a little bit of Natural England, the way that we work and the things that we've learned, I suppose. We've all seen how important access to the natural environment has become for people. And some people have been able to see that in slowing down, they're noticing nature more and realizing some of the benefits. And some of us have seen the benefits of maybe better air quality and less traffic for a time, noticing wildlife more. But we've also seen that there are stark differences in the access to green space, in the quality of green space, and it's very unequal. And there are many unequal impacts that this pandemic has had across many areas. People with less are impacted more. And this is a continuation of inequalities that we've seen when it comes to all kinds of things, but in the natural environment sector, air pollution, flooding, urban heat, climate change impacts, and so on. So we need to address these inequalities, change a system that isn't working, a way of living that isn't working for us. And we know that people and communities want this. We don't want business as usual. That's what we're hearing. We don't want to go back to something that we did before. We want something that's better, not well. And what we've done, we have created the climate change and biodiversity crises. We've degraded our natural environment to a state where we're in a crisis situation. And they're completely interlinked, the natural environment and the climate change crisis. They come together, and we need to avoid going further down this path because it won't be good for us. We need to reduce our greenhouse gases. We need to reach our net zero targets, but we also need to build our resilience, and that's resilience for people and for nature. We need to adapt and accommodate the change that we're going to see, because we're going to see a lot of change. And it's important to note at this point that a lot of the stuff that we need to do for nature and for climate change, that's a lot of the things that we need to do for people to have better health and well-being and reduce impacts from diseases such as the situation we're seeing at the moment. And that's where multifunctional nature-based solutions come in. This is vital for people and for nature. We need to deliver climate change adaptation for people. We need to deliver it for wildlife as well. And we need to implement it widely and equally. It needs to be good quality, it needs to be accessible, and that's where this local community-based stuff is so vital and so important. It needs to, this multifunctionality, it needs to do a number of things for people and for nature. It needs to be biodiverse. That quality, that connection with nature is really, really important. And it needs to be well looked after. And again, when you value something in your local community, you look after it as, part of your life and part of your world. And this stuff can be on any scale, and be very large, and some of it needs to be very large, but also small things that mean to people that add up to a lot of joined up stuff in local areas is also vital. but also connection with nature. So nature can do a lot of stuff to help us avoid flooding or urban heat island and things like that. But making sure that we're connected to nature, it's absolutely vital for our well-being. But it's also vital for nature. You know, the evidence shows that if people are connected with nature, if they visit nature, they are much more likely to take action to support it. So the two things go hand in hand, and we all benefit from those things. We've seen different people accessing green space due to this situation as well. So we know that we need to take action to reach different groups better, to talk to them about the benefits of the natural environment and get the input from local communities. And we've talked about green recovery, you know, those green jobs, we need to have those to restructure our economy around people and the environment. We desperately need a proper green recovery to do that restructuring. And for us, it's highlighted a lot of new areas. You know, the work that we do is crucial for people and nature in the context of talking about climate change and in health and well-being. But it really just focuses on new areas where we can help and stuff that we can work on better. So, for example, we've got lots of resources, such as we've just published a climate change adaptation manual. There's a green infrastructure section in there, and recreation section that gives, you know, practical help with how to adapt our green spaces to nature. And we do climate change webinars. We've got a series on YouTube that hopefully gives a bit of an underpinning of nature and climate change. But we're also refreshing our countryside code. So the countryside code is how we act in nature and how we get the most out of it whilst respecting it. But we know now that that work has to make sure that we encourage people to feel comfortable in the countryside, comfortable in green spaces, reducing the barriers that people find, and making sure that we reach other groups that don't feel comfortable in the natural environment. We're also working with the NHS, Public Health England, and the National Academy for Social Prescribing to work on how we do that social prescribing. So where we can move more into prevention rather than cure. So the GPs can refer people to outside nature-based activities. So there's lots going on. We also have area teams that work in local communities. But I mean, pretty much everything is pointing us in this direction that we need to change. You know, this change can be positive for everybody and for our natural environment, and we need to avoid doing the same old stuff. You know, we've got a real opportunity here, and it would be great if we could grasp it together.
Great, thank you so much, Sarah. And the publication that you mentioned is up on the chat, and we'll be sharing that after the webinar as well. So on to Julie from Octopus to tell us a little bit more about their work as well and their response to COVID.
Yeah, it's great to hear that much of what we're doing is just resonating with what has been said so far. So Octopus is a network of 14 of Islington's largest multi-purpose community centres. And even in our structure itself, it's an ambitious rethink to being sustainable and sustainability. To bring us up to date, I mean, we were to celebrate our 20th birthday this year, but like many parties, it's cancelled for this year, but I'm sure we can have a big party next year. But we've been really developing 2 programs of work, and this fits into urban growing and health and well-being because the 2 are intrinsically linked. Most recently, because of the impact that we've had around reclaiming unused spaces on estates, in neighbourhoods, repurposing land for community growing, we've made 2 presentations to Islington's Environment and Regeneration Strategy Group, which has resulted in Octopus being commissioned to develop a community growing strategy. This is just kick-started, and it couldn't have come at a better time, because me always looking at there's always a people are rethinking completely how local space is used, how we tackle local food systems, and where food comes from. So it's great right now that we've got a handle on this kind of role, this community-led development of a growing. I was in, well, all through the pandemic so far, I've been in meetings that I would never have been invited to. And yesterday I was in a really great meeting with two of Islington's health strategists who have been involved in developing the Islington food poverty strategy. We've taken a much more active role in Islington's Food Poverty Alliance. So all the good that is coming out of this, we really just have to harness that now and take it forward. In terms of our growing strategy, we're being a bit brave as well, and we're kind of challenging the norm. So we've been working on estates where we're battling with the housing team because they're always no, and where's the key and lock up after you go. We get frustrated by how estates are built where there's no thought to what is left as the community growing space or garden, or it's always in the darkest, shadiest bit. So we're up against it in terms of where communities want to grow, but they've been given no space to grow because nothing really will grow there. But we have been really imaginative around how we've done that, where we've actually created a courtyard forest. So we can get creative. But we're now getting into the realms of really talking about permaculture, looking at earth care, people care, fair share. Again, it's all very contemporary in terms of discussion. We're having really amazing conversations with, I can't believe that we've done this, but we've been picked up and chosen as a charity of support by Global Architects Grimshaw, who were just leading on some really fantastic work around sustainable development of social housing builds, but also in terms of taking us into this new territory of agritecture, which is, in Islington, we've got no space. We're the second smallest borough in London. We've got hardly any green space at all. So we need to grow on roofs. We're talking to a local architect about growing in garages, and mushrooms have come up a lot, you know, how we can use garages to grow mushrooms. But we also come up against many, many challenges, which is about access to water. When you're gardening in a really urban environment, trying to get water is hard. So we're now looking at how we build in water harvesting into the gardens, believe it or not. And those of you who are gardeners, very difficult. It was the same as toilet roll and flour, I'm afraid. So we need to make sure that the compost is kept in Islington. Islington is actually one of the boroughs that still does food waste collection, but it's transported miles and miles out of the borough, and the compost never comes back. So we're talking about, you know, with the council, how do we get local composting schemes up and running so that we can actually get some good soil improvement into those raised beds that we have to build, because a lot of the land in Islington is contaminated. So, I mean, in terms of Islington, just to give you an idea, I know I'm up against it. I could have wrote for like and spoke for hours, but just to give you a bit of a context, during the pandemic, I just want to say that we've responded incredibly to the need for food. And just as an example, over the past 18 weeks, we have delivered food parcels, emergency food parcels, and it's not just been to those shielding and self-isolating. We've really uncovered the level of food poverty in Islington. We know it exists, but this is really being highlighted. 14,431 emergency food parcels. The number of locally cooked meals distributed, 41,351. Just one centre alone started in week 1 with 10 food parcels delivered. Week 18, 280 food parcels, 200 cooked meals. So I think what can we say? There's a need out there for a better local infrastructure to deal with climate change that is it's linked with food poverty. But lastly, I just want to say we cannot avoid the conversation about how access to the great outdoors, gardening, just a green space on your housing estate can actually be immensely beneficial to your health and well-being. This next crisis we're facing is about isolation. People are fearful. We are community centres who are used to bringing people out of their house, and they're fearful of coming out. We're starting to plan routes that get them to the community centre, but take them maybe on a longer route, but it's a less busier route. I'll just give you one example for I finished, because recently we it's struggled in Islington. A local GP saw what we were doing and immediately started to support a local growing group, but also highlighted the fact that there were several older people who came to the surgery every single day. They came because they could chat with each other, it was warm, they could read the magazines, they could have a snooze, but that wasn't doing anything really for their health and well-being. So we've worked with those older people to build a little garden outside of the GP surgery so that they're still going back to the place where they feel safe, they feel welcome, but they're actually now gardening outside and feeling much more benefit for it. So it's just amazing how we can actually transform things really quickly if we just get on and do it. And I forget who said it now about like just being guerrilla gardeners. We have taught Islington's children to make seed bombs. Brilliant. And so they just go like making seed bombs and throwing seed bombs anywhere. So yes, we've got loads of wildflowers popping up.
That's fantastic, Julie.
So,
yeah. I'm just going to stop you there because I'm very aware that Afsheen has to leave in 10 minutes and I want to make sure that she's able to speak. But when you mentioned the council worker saying, where's the key to, lock things up? I almost want to use the key to unlock those barriers, but we can talk about that later on. But for now, I'd like to hand over to Afsheen to introduce more about the work that she's doing. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you. And I totally understand the challenge of sharing all the fantastic stuff that everyone is doing in a short space of time, isn't it? And hope there'll be room for us to collaborate and talk more in other spaces. Thank you for the introduction on my work. And here I'm here to speak more about Repowering London and our work in community energy. We're a Brixton-based organisation, and we were the first to install community-owned solar panels on an inner-city context, on social housing, working with a diverse community. And up until that point, when we did that in 2012, community energy was seen something that happened in the rural areas with rural and white middle class communities, and wasn't seen as something that was inclusive and could involve diverse communities. And Repowering really specializes in working with socially deprived communities, as well as that diverse community, that richness that London has to offer. And our aim and mission is really about putting people at the heart of the energy system. And we want to create a decentralized, decarbonized, but equally democratized energy system that is inclusive. And we need to make sure that this transition is a just one. So when households and people are facing issues of heating or eating, some of the issues that Julie's just spoken about, then climate change does not hold any significance. It doesn't, they're not going to react to it. It's about saving money. It's about affordability, living in warm, affordable homes, and job opportunities, work. How are they going to pay those bills? And our history and foundation, having been in Brixton, we've designed and built our projects so that we are inclusive and that we're bringing in the voices of minorities and vulnerable groups in our response. And that has really been how we've also shaped our response to COVID. And yes, we do put solar panels on roofs and community buildings, which is great. And it's something that is really visible and tangible for communities to connect with. But people invest in our schemes, yes, for climate change, but equally because of the local benefits that are going back into those communities. It's about keeping money in that local community through ring-fenced funds, through paying back returns to our investors who live locally and our residents, you know. And that makes a big difference. And while we're doing solar panels and creating clean energy and renewable energy, we're also giving that real vital support to communities on saving money on their bills, switching providers, managing their debts, accessing other support services that are there and available in their communities and offered by local authorities. And a very important strand that we have developed has been around young people, engaging young people in training and work experience. So back in the day, and even now, when we go door knocking and, you know, encourage people to get involved, you know, it's about what's in it for me and what's in it for my young people, and what's, you know, how are they going to benefit from this. And so we developed a training program that gives really practical skills and experience for young people to learn, but equally open opportunities for them, because a lot of the young people we work with wouldn't have had the chance to go and you know, offer their time for free for an internship or, you know, an apprenticeship. And we offer like a very intermediary course which allows them to just gain the soft skills, gain the opportunity of understanding what are the, you know, different work opportunities available to them, be it marketing, be it events, be it technical, renewable energy, be it, you know, engagement, event management. So it's a whole range. And I think that's been really, really valuable. And equally, while working with young people, we've been mentoring community members so that they can become decision makers and leaders. And the story that I really want to share with you has been, and has really come out further through the COVID response has been, and the crisis, has been our work with our local community champions. And Fran was someone who came to us asking for help through help, you know, to negotiate with her energy supplier. And following that, you know, she then attended some of our focus groups to design our energy projects. And then she became a champion in a paid role. And today she's our advocate in the community, really spreading the word and making sure that people know about the free helpline we offer to residents at this time in terms of supporting them in their energy bills. And because people are living in their homes using a lot more electricity, and there's more fear for those who are on prepayment meters that they might be disconnected and cut off. And Fran has led and shaped our response to COVID and made sure that our essential information got out there to the different community groups. And, you know, a lot of local authorities have been focused on food provision and food parcels, whereas we've made sure that energy is not left, you know, not missed, because it is an essential need for people, especially at such times. So we made sure that our leaflets went into those food parcels, and Fran's been really critical in making that happen. And what's come out for me really is climate action is not something to be put off for later or once we emerge out of the crisis, but actually it offers solutions to our problems today. And when done in an inclusive and community-led way is where we see greatest impact. And there are many Frans out there who are answers to building back better. So we just need to find them. That's me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Afsheen. And just, you mentioned door knocking and you finished on sort of how can we be more inclusive. What do you think that we can and sort of should do to ensure that energy transition is something that everyone in the community, people of all backgrounds, can be involved in as we make a green recovery? What have you done in your local community that you'd like to see scaled up in communities across the UK?
What we've seen during you know, this lockdown period has been a huge surge of volunteers. You know, people really wanting to use their time and get involved and do something in their local community. And we've had a whole series of at least 7 AGMs lately, and usually AGMs are such boring places. You don't get many people come, but we were so surprised that the participation and was a lot higher. So I feel like there is, you know, there is the appetite out there, and we have to capitalize on that. So what we've been doing is running in our communities, be it in Lambeth and others, is really connecting with existing community groups and bringing these volunteers together and having these conversations in terms of what can we do, how can we use our collective skills and resources to make more happen. And I'd like to point people out to two websites and links for more information. So if you're in London and your community group based in London wanting to do something, do have a look at Community Energy London website. We organise monthly meetings, and it's a great place to come together with other groups who are doing the same and facing similar challenges, and to really identify new opportunities. So I'd encourage you to either join a Community Energy London meeting, which is I think on the last Thursday of every month. Also have a look at Community Energy England's website. There's a hub with a whole pack of resources and how you can deliver projects. Community Energy England have done two reports, one on a vision, what does community energy look like for 2030 and how we play an important role in achieving net zero targets. Also done a report on where the sector is and how government can support us more in really making this, community energy grow and flourish. And so far, government support has been very thin on the ground. So it's all been very much led by community groups like us. And of course, if you want to get involved, drop me a line, drop Repowering a line, see what we've got going on, and I'm happy to collaborate.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Afsheen, for taking part and for sharing all of the great stuff that you're doing with us. We've had plenty of questions come through on the chat, but encouraging everyone to keep posting those questions. And one of them that's come through is to Farhana, and around the theory of change, really, that you've got for Camden Think and Do, and using existing neglected council assets and repurposing them for community projects. Can you speak a bit more about that model and sort of how you think it's an opportunity to sort of expand, and linking it to another question around, funding. Obviously, normally shop spaces are considered to be expensive, and locations and spaces is usually one of the main barriers to community action and groups. So just wanted to see what your thoughts were about that and how it's been successful in Camden.
Yeah, sure. So the normal rent on that shop, because we investigated some of this, would have been around 40,000 without business rate per year. And that shop, which is in a prime location in the high street, was not affordable as a cafe, actually, and the cafe had shut. So it was just sitting there empty and no one to take it on. This is before COVID, this is back in November. And our council already had the lease on it because it was a community cafe anyway, and the community cafe that used to be there went somewhere else. So now the kind of community enterprises that we have or are wanting to set up, especially if they're BAME-led, especially if they're youth-led, just don't have anywhere near the funding to start. They can't get started. They have to have some base and they have to have some hub. And I feel that that's the most important model. I come also, from a major philanthropy and have had, compared with others, quite a lot of success in accessing, philanthropic money. And I have to say, again, there is a huge amount of unconscious bias. This is, again, a thing that has come out from COVID. It's a learning. If you think that racism doesn't exist, institutionalized biases, discrimination, think again. Most of the brilliant work that is going on at the community level often is done, with communities of color, with women, with disability groups, and they've all done it unpaid or with very little money. And actually I chose to shun that world, partly because I was disgusted and I wasn't getting like the big enough grants for me. And I sort of want to talk about that, because that's why the theory of change is there. We have to use the assets that exist and make a demand on our leaders all around, whilst also exposing the huge flaws and imbalances and inequalities in our system. And so I've decided to start where we start with what there is. In climate terms as well, because I'm a sort of slight policy nerd, buildings are a huge part of the climate emission story, a huge part of energy bills poverty, which Afsheen has just said very much. We have fuel poverty, we have underheated winter, I could go on and on, but you all know that here. So starting with buildings and greening existing buildings, especially for the UK, which has 30 million buildings that are frankly rubbish and old, is a good place to start, and to reimagine them and put them back into, as it were, commons, create new commons. How can I create new commons when I don't even have 10,000 in my bank account or 5,000 in my bank account or need to worry about bills? Well, I'm going to go and make a demand and politically, through a community-based approach, take back assets that belong to us in some ways, which is at the moment the community assets. The idea is also to ask private businesses, other buildings like arts and cultural centres to lend, their spaces. We're also, as a result of the recession, now going to see huge numbers of buildings shut down forever. And we have to start imagining what kind of economy can we build that allows people to make use of what there is around them. We're going to have some, and the theory of change, that I'm trying to work on and legally sort of figure out is, a long time ago, there was a right to buy. The right to buy council housing transformed actually the lives of many people. It also transformed our politics. It transformed many things. And maybe what we need is a new community-based right to use some of these buildings, for some period of time. I'm sort of still figuring this out. It's conjectural. And then, make use of the willingness, again, I feel there's a thirst and a willingness, including by businesses, to collaborate. They want to do this. They want to make available. They can make available a hall for a day, a month. And the theory of change is always go where people are. Let's stop devising campaigns that try kind of a bit top down to, reach a sort of segmented, targeted. Let's go to where a whole person, a whole family, where they live and work, and let's nurture literally the walking routes and the soil and the land where people are. So that, I think, is a little bit about the theory of change. And it's, wherever you can make traction, go for it. And, most of the councils in the whole of the UK, cities, local boroughs, etc., 500, whatever there are, they've all declared a climate and ecological emergency. They did that last year, actually. So you can make more demands and now weave in, what are they doing? Because most councils don't have a climate centre, right? So it was another question that was asked. So that was why I was thinking last year, I want to bring climate change, climate chaos, the sustainable development goals to my high street. I go and talk about these things all the time. I want to bring the circular economy to the high street. I want to walk into a shop and talk about it with people and put it into action. And then, we've weaved together all the library of things, the repairs, the, brilliant stuff that is going on, swap shops and all the rest of it. But to do that in high streets is, I think, the key to a very big transformative behaviour change.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you identified something that we've seen at Semble as well, where there is a disconnect between all this great grassroots community action and sort of the more national conversation. And I think that there's also the opportunities where there's big willingness at the moment we've seen from businesses and from national bodies to really try and connect that. And so I think that's where the real exciting opportunities are. Talking of sort of the national side of things, Sarah, from Natural England's point of view, obviously Natural England's a large national body, and in terms of sort of addressing that disconnect, what would you advise sort of larger national organisations to do to help community action, especially when they don't necessarily have a local base in some of those places?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question, but it's absolutely vital, of course. But what I wanted to just say coming in after Farhana is that I completely agree with everything that's just been said, but what we need is a system that enables people to be able to do that. So sometimes people feel that, work on the natural environment is something for somebody else, they're not welcome there, or it's a hobby for the middle classes to go out and, enjoy nature, which it really, really isn't, and it really, really shouldn't be. So we need to enable that connection, but not make it so that, and I think some people, there's evidence that some people feel like this, that it's all on the individual, it's all on the little people, you know, you've got to do your recycling and you've got to do your stuff and then, you know, we'll all be sorted. And that's not the case. We need big action right from the very, very top as well to support that kind of grassroots stuff. So we need both areas, and you know, we just don't have that from the top. Yeah, in terms of big organizations, it's hard for me to speak to all of them, but I'm sure that national organizations, you know, they have where they have presences in places across a larger area, you know, make sure that you're connected with your local area. So for us, we have a national structure, but we also have area teams. So we're making sure that we have the two things where we know we need to deal with national policy and, you know, grab all that information and evidence and make it accessible to the people that are doing the work on the ground. So the people that are working on planning, delivering and designing green infrastructure, land use, land management, all the things, and you know, some of the kind of more the kind of nature conservation core stuff that we do, it's delivered and it's done at a local level. So we need to, you know, make sure we're joining up on that. And then our area teams, it's still big areas, you know, they make the local connections and that sort of web moving across all this kind of geographical area, and understanding what is needed and the input from a local area. So for me, I work a lot on spatial data. So I look at how habitats and species are vulnerable to climate change. And because I have a national role, I look at that across the country, and it's provided, you know, the resources we have are provided at that national level, which can be useful, but it's making sure that you have the conversations at the more local level so that the really key, important local information, knowledge, experience, knowledge of opportunities and constraints that are out there are drawn in. So it's always that kind of meshing and webbing of all the things that come in and are important to drive action, and listen to what people have to say at a, you know, community level.
Great, thanks so much, Sarah. And Julie, what practical lessons do you think we can learn from the community response to this current COVID crisis for the bigger coming climate emergency? What behaviours should we be taking forward, and what should we be leaving behind? And I mean behaviours not just in a sort of personal behaviour kind of way, but just as a society. Where do you think we need to be going forward, based on sort of your experiences in Islington?
Yeah, something that we've benefited immensely from in Islington is that we've had this established network of community centres for 20 years who all work together really, really well, who have got the infrastructure to respond really rapidly, which is what we've proven, because we're ahead of any response from Islington Council. And I love Islington Council dearly. We work really, really hand in hand together. But we were well ahead, and they were coming to us, you know, people within homes and communities and whatever, they were coming to us and saying, what should we do? Because we are place-based, we work in neighbourhoods, we work with communities, we're not on the high street often, but we are those spaces where people come and gather and meet. So I think what I've learned from this is that if you work really closely with your local authority on an equitable level, and they treat you as equal partners, you can move really quickly. Islington Council was able to commandeer the Semble Sports Centre as our major depot for the receipt of food into the borough. Of people, or volumes of people who were transporting the food from that major depot into the individual communities. So going forward, I would actually say that there has to be a place-based approach. That's how you get things done rapidly. There has to be a belief in that there is huge community assets out there that are untapped, and decisions should be stopped being made in the boardroom or in the council like kind of chambers, And those decisions should come from the community, because we've seen it over the past month. People have connected with their community in ways that they've never connected with before. They've met their neighbours. They've realised that there's lots of people who are not like them. Islington is often thought of as a really trendy, rich borough, and it's not. It's one of the most impoverished, but that tends to get hidden because of the nighttime economy. So I think going forward, we need to talk. We need to be on an equitable playing field, and then we need to really acknowledge those assets that are in the community, business assets as well. We've connected with businesses in ways that we've never done, but we need to do this together. No one's got the answer. We all come from this from different perspectives, and those different perspectives make something work. So I'm going forward with huge positivity, because there's so much that's come out of this, and we've just got to harness it. We need to keep that momentum going now. And a conversation like this is amazing. I always say I get goosebump moments when something comes together, and I'm just reading the comments and the connectivity that we're making now on that national level. There's people from Liverpool here, I can say, hello Liverpool. So it's amazing. So let's just see this as a start to keep this kind of conversation going, so we can share effective practice. Let's not reinvent the wheel. People are out there doing amazing stuff. Just shout about it. It's great. Thank you for all your work. It's great.
Absolutely, Julie. And just building off that fantastic response, and building on the momentum that we've seen happen over the past months, Farhana, can you speak to how you think we can ensure that link to those unpaid and overworked volunteer community organisations with the right ideas, like Camden Think and Do, like Octopus, and local authorities who have the funds, often, not always, but often have the funds, and they've got the links to support that grassroots action? How can we actually embed that in the communities going forward, so it's not just seen as an emergency response, it's actually a sort of a new model of doing things going forward?
Yeah, look, money is really important. Money is needed, resources are needed, and volunteer-based things get, you know, people get exhausted, and it's a continuous sort of circle which is exhausting. And I'm frankly at one of those points now. So I'm going off after this call, after I've done another call, you know, for a break. And nearly all of the volunteers who are part of Think and Do had a burst of energy, which, you know, most of us know that, you know, sort of cycle. We've worked in this space. So I think we absolutely need to get this legislated and, you know, get a blend of funding. That's my approach. We shouldn't settle for remaining a purely voluntary based thing, and that will require persuading, you know, funders, donors, businesses to provide resources. There was a question in the chat about why would councils be reluctant, owners be reluctant to provide, you know, the spaces if they didn't think we would give them back. I don't want them back. They can run it themselves. I don't want it. So the idea is a more permissionless, it's using some of the energy and ideas and ways of thinking that I learned with XR, actually. XR itself, you know, let's put that to one side, but some of the permissionless energy that it brought, and allowing people to use a sort of framework, use a toolkit and get on with it themselves, that's what will be, I hope, the most useful Think and Do, you know, toolkit methodology. Here's a little starter pack, get on with it. But to make those packs, we do need some of the larger research organisations, philanthropies. We need little bits of funds. So Camden Council, as part of the commitment to roll out Think and Do, have given us a tiny bit of SIL money, the community infrastructure levy money, to use that. So little pockets can unleash and support bigger pockets. But I have absolutely no doubt that, you know, you need funding, and we all need, you know, even the 66 participants on this call are an incredible network. We need to go to the philanthropies and say, and make this case, and make them now make good the lack of support, the Cinderella, you know, the local community workers, the Cinderella of the world, and it shouldn't be. It is the absolute mycelium, it is the nurturer, it is the way in which other things flourish and grow. And I think COVID has made them more responsive and understanding about that, because they've all had to be locked down and have become involved in mutual aid groups and so forth. And, you know, bigger thinkers, I say bigger, you know, like the conceptually, like Kate Raworth and many others, they're looking at what does a city look like if everyone can only, you know, walk or commute within 15 minutes, you know? So that is a really big idea, and it's a huge idea, and we should get funding for that, and we should have loads and loads and loads of think and do's in every high street. Every school can run a think and do space. And the think and do idea is both, I know I'm talking quite a lot, you know, it's also my understanding, like I was a sort of academic and a researcher and an advisor very much in my head, and what we need to say is every single person, every single organization has to think and do something different as a result of the climate crisis, as a result of COVID crisis, as a result of thinking through how the mainstream economy was in fact leading to a dying planet and diminishing our children's life chances. So we can no longer just have the strategists and the policymakers and the high level sort of people who make these decisions, and then we go away and implement them. And, you know, there's these tiny little pockets of experimentation. You know, it's time to kind of demand more and say, you know, the small scale is the big scale. We are doing the bigger picture lifting, and we are shifting and opening up a completely different model of an economy based on well-being and based on resilience and based on these community connections. And I feel that that's what the positive part of COVID and climate and everything colliding has done. It's made people kind of thirsty for that, as I said, and yeah, we have to make that demand. We have to make more demands on all of our leaders, all of our funders, everyone, and we have to believe in that vision that its time has come. And I saw that just finally loads and loads of community groups. So Camden is very lucky. It too, like Islington, has huge pockets of deprivation. You know, some of the highest ranking poverty wards also exist in Camden. Some of the wealthiest wards in the country also exist in Camden. And it has had decades and decades of actually community groups. It has a wealth of community groups that has been supported over the long term by Camden Council. So we have a very thick web of people and activists and, to draw upon. And what they need is actually weaving together more. That's the biggest thing that they need, doing more, to look up and now connect up all their work. We have Transition Town, and none of Think and Do would have happened without the amazing work of, the Transition Town Network and Transition Kentish Town, which has been run by a handful of people for yonks. They were able to bring everyone together. We've got Crossroads, we've got, all of these amazing BAME-led groups here who we've started to get to know and pull in, and who weren't that interested in climate as per se, but who actually are bringing in all sorts of climate justice, sort of concepts. So yeah, I'm very excited, but also feel very overworked and feel like maybe one follow-up is how we can capture this excitement and just, write some large funding proposals.
I've got a favourite Edward Abbey quote, which says, I'm a part-time activist. You need to always give yourself the time to enjoy nature and not burn out. And I think it's really difficult to do, but it's definitely something I think we need to make sure we all support ourselves on, because otherwise, burnt out activists are never good for anything. But when you mentioned Transition Towns, it made me think of Rob Hopkins and his saying that it's a failure. This current crisis is a failure of imagination, and so I think at the moment we've got an opportunity to reimagine what the future should look like. And Julie, you mentioned that we've got some people from Liverpool on the webinar, and we actually got a question from one of them, which I'm going to ask Sarah to answer. And they're an employee of a local authority in Liverpool, and say it's so hard to get climate on the agenda. And do you have any advice for how to get climate action at the top of the agenda at government tables, where maybe councils haven't necessarily declared a climate emergency and don't work as closely with community groups as is the case in Islington and Camden?
Yeah, well, we know so much. You know, we have everything. We almost have everything we need on paper. You know, we've talked about the amazing people out there with amazing imagination and creative solutions to the situation that we have. You know, that's a huge resource to tap into. But also on a kind of less creative front, you know, organisations like Natural England, the Environment Agency, Forestry Commission, there's a wealth of evidence and information out there, and many besides, so the voluntary sector as well, the Wildlife Trust, the RSPB, the BTO, on and on and on. You know, we have tons of information, and we also have great partnerships, you know, in local areas, so local nature partnerships that local authorities will certainly be part of. I don't think so making the most of those and inviting those people to the table so that they can put in place or share the information and evidence that they have, and the ways to make our spaces, our place-based solutions much better. For me, like nature-based solutions, green infrastructure, whatever you want to call it, the provision of quality biodiverse green space that provides amazing climate change adaptation and, you know, all kinds of other well-being opportunities for people. It's a no-brainer. I don't understand why it's not, you know, more on the agenda of all of these places, because they're supposed to be working for the people that live in their areas. So, you know, just keeping that conversation going is really important. I don't think the lack of declaring a climate emergency is necessarily a problem. I mean, it's nice, it's good to see that people are coming on board, but what you have to do is declare a climate and biodiversity emergency and then do something about it. And so obviously, you know, not everybody has done that. You know, perhaps right to the very top, we declare climate emergencies, we put in place policy, and then we do things that completely contradict the policy and legislation that we have. And so it's always a very confusing picture. But I'd say, yeah, make the most of those local networks that you have. They have the information that you need, and I guess it's about all of us continuing that sort of pioneering action, continuing to bring in the evidence base, because to me, I think we're overwhelmed with evidence. We have everything we need to say this is better for everybody. So, you know, much like everybody has said, you know, it's continuing that information, providing the evidence, and keeping that on the table and making the most of those community and partnership groups.
I failed to unmute myself, so if anyone who's keeping track of the Zoom bingo, I've given you on there. Absolutely, Sarah, and I think that's a really lovely place at which we can sort of finish the Q&A section, because I think we've got the Minister joining us in a second. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague Keir, who's going to do a bit of a wrap up of the previous minutes and introduce Minister Powell.
Thank you, Domi. So thank you, Minister Powell, for joining us. Rebecca Powell is the Conservative MP for Taunton Deane in Somerset. She is the Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for DEFRA, the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. Her portfolio includes domestic natural environment, climate change adaptation, land use, floods and water. Before entering politics, Rebecca had a career in journalism and PR, specialising in environment, and was the trustee for the Somerset Wildlife Trust. Just to give a quick overview of what we've been discussing, it's been a focus on local, hyperlocal community action and how best to support that action, especially how to maintain the momentum we've gained and ensure that these projects are properly resourced and have kind of all the support they need from local authorities and national organisations to really make the most of their great work. So I'd ask you first just to reply to the title of the webinar, what can communities learn from the COVID-19 response to help inspire climate action?
Good morning. Sorry, I only came in halfway through that, I'm afraid. So I was just going to give a bit of a general speech first, if that's all right, and then have a bit of a question and answer session. I think that's what we were intending to do. So I'm actually back in my constituency now. So I'm sitting, it's slightly unreal, I'm sitting in the middle of the Somerset countryside, speaking to you all, battling with my technology. So I've just got it all sorted. Anyway, it's so brilliant to actually join you all. And I'm so pleased that you're holding this event, which is, clearly you are harnessing what has been a terrible time, but looking at the ways we could actually learn some lessons from it and move forward. And that's what we're all doing, in particularly in DEFRA. So it's great that you're having this discussion, which is absolutely the right thing to do. And I hope that we'll hear and you'll be able to feed in lots of the ideas and views that you've had from this event to us, because I'll be very, very pleased to hear them. And I'm sorry I haven't been able to join the rest of the event. But as I'm sure you've all touched on during the morning, this disease, the coronavirus, was a disease or is a disease transmitted from wild animals to humans. And that really just shows us how important it is to protect nature. If we couldn't find a clearer message, really, could we, on this subject that about protecting nature. And we need to do it really not just for nature's sake, but actually we need to build greater resilience right across the environment. And that means natural environment also means the communities and societies and the economies within that, so that we actually help to protect lives and the economy. And I was just going to say that one thing that throughout this incident, you know, hasn't changed is actually the fact that we are facing a climate crisis, and linked to that actually a biodiversity crisis. And I really want to reiterate the link between those two things, and the need for climate and biodiversity action is just as great as it ever was. And with the growing global biodiversity and climate crisis, we are at this crucial point. It's basically, you could say, a point of no return. And it actually leads to, if we don't take serious action, potentially catastrophic impacts for human well-being and our development. So climate change and biodiversity loss do need to be confronted urgently. I'm absolutely sure you're all aware of that, and with equal ambition. And really, as I said at the beginning, they are inextricably linked. And protecting nature through what we're calling nature-based solutions does provide us with the benefits for climate change and adaptation and mitigation and biodiversity, whilst also improving outcomes for people. So these things all work together. And for that reason, that's why we've put nature at the heart of the COP26 event. And this event will be a milestone for this ambition, and for cleaner energy, for a more resilient future, and for a flourishing nature, supported by green financial systems. I think you've talked about that already today. And then we've got the Convention on Biological Diversity also taking place just ahead of the COP. 2021 will be a crucial year for nature, and a really big opportunity for us to link together these two things, biodiversity and nature. And as part of the UK presidency, COP26, we're actually also going to be championing the all of society approach, and that will recognise that if we are going to achieve these global, this ambition of global climate action, we will need to bring everyone together. So that includes all the people on this call today, young academics, young people, investors, civil society and business, as well as member states. It's basically a call to action, bringing all of these people together, basically bringing communities together, and resetting our relationship with nature, and increasing public understanding of COP26 and the importance of these nature-based solutions that I've been alluding to. And we really want to harness the energy and galvanise local communities, providing them with spaces to identify and promote innovative and locally appropriate ways to use nature-based solutions. I'm sure lots of you have already got examples of things that you know about. I've certainly got some right here in Taunton, Deane, that local groups are already starting to work on. And in addition to that, nature, adaptation and resilience is one of the 5 areas of focus for our presidency. and we will use the COP26 presidency to actually mobilise greater political ambition, the tools and finance to support this practical adaptation and build on what we're basically all talking about today. And it gives a great opportunity actually to get the messaging out, potentially to groups who may not necessarily have this on their agenda. I mean, as I often say, we're all the converted, but what we'd like to do, and I think this is why your event could be so helpful, is spread the word to everyone really, and potentially those who are not necessarily engaged on this agenda, and so that when we've held the COP26, we will leave some sort of lasting legacy. So we don't want it to be a one-off event. And it's very vital then that we central government, can help to lead the way, but that we get local governments and we work at a local level on all of these things. And local adaptation advisory panels will be very important, and core cities will be very important. We do also have something called a national adaptation programme, and that recognises the crucial role of local authorities in building resilience, and it includes dedicated chapters on adaptation in the built environment and local government, as well as the natural environment. You will have heard I'm involved with the Environment Bill, and through that we'll be introducing something called nature recovery networks, and they'll be very much working from a local scale, which is why the local import is so important. So nature-based solutions can be a crucial tool in building from the local level upwards, and it's really crucial, whether by reducing people's exposure to future disasters such as catastrophic floods or drought, or improving wildlife's ability to respond and adapt itself to climate change. So these methods and measures will be very important. And so just to wind up, the recovery from coronavirus offers a real opportunity for us to build back better. It's something we absolutely must harness, and it will then mean, yes, we can have economic growth, but it can be in a sustainable way. We don't just want or need to go back to the high carbon, unevenly distributed model of the past. This really is an opportunity to basically change our ways. And there is huge potential to invest in greater, greener, more resilient growth. Sustainable use of natural systems can really help to bring climate change under control and safeguard that biological diversity, by which I basically mean nature. We just want to protect and enhance nature. And what that will then do is create more resilience right across the nation, indeed across the world, whether it's rural, coastal, urban, and throughout all of our communities. So I think I'll wind up there. I think you've got a few questions, and it's great to talk to you. And if anyone wants to ask me a question, I'm here for a little bit more time.
Thank you very much, Minister. We've got quite a few questions that have come through on the chat if you'd like to have a look at those. But the first one I'm going to ask you is, just building on before you joined, we heard from community groups all across London who have a really detailed understanding of the needs of local people and the issues that they're facing. And as you say, as we begin to build back better, how will DEFRA ensure that it engages with and supports grassroots community organisations and utilises their expertise?
Yes, well, I mean, I think your event demonstrates that so many people are already doing really good stuff. And as you say, they do understand what we're talking about. It's also about spreading the word so that we get more people in. But DEFRA is absolutely focused on this, and it'll be a very important part of the whole process that we're trying to develop, because the grassroots knowledge is so important. And we will be reaching out to youth groups, faith groups, civic society, charities, grassroots groups, all across the country. And we can do that. Actually, I think this demonstrates quite well. We can do quite a lot of it and get cracking with Zooms, and this way of communicating. Whilst it's a shame we're not personally meeting, but we can. What we're finding is we can access a lot of people, can't we? And we can engage a lot of people. So we'll start by doing a lot of that. There'll be events all over the place. plus of course then in-person meetings when we can do them, because we really do want to share ideas, want to hear innovative views, share good practice. Also, you know, I'm a great one for saying, let's not reinvent the wheel. If somebody's doing something good, let's just harness that, let's copy it and maybe scale it up. So it's going to be a very important part of getting across the message about linking nature, biodiversity and climate change, and then putting the tools in place. I referred to a few of those things, which is why the Environment Bill will also be so useful with setting out the framework for improving biodiversity. So I hope you'll continue to be highly involved and that we will get some feedback from all of the views that we've heard today.
Thank you, Minister. One more question. Not reinventing the wheel has already been mentioned.
Oh no, is it really?
So glad we're aligned on that. But funding has absolutely been also a key issue that community groups are facing, or lack thereof. And I know that DEFRA has launched a £40 million Green Recovery Challenge Fund that aims to bring forward funding to help environmental organisations start work on projects across England to restore nature and tackle climate change. We wanted to know, what kind of work are you looking to fund, and do you see grassroots community organisations playing a role in this work and receiving funding?
Yes. Yeah, well, I mean, we're very excited that this has been launched this week. It's a £40 million Green Recovery Challenge Fund. And a great deal of thought's been going on behind the scenes, working and getting views and advice from a whole range of organisations, but particularly the environmental NGOs, who are already doing a lot of really significant work in this field, a lot of which could be scaled up. So but it's not just a fund for them. People will apply for it, but we want it to be simple and quick, and more details will be coming out because we've literally just launched it. So we'll let you know in due course, but we will be looking for wide range of charities, environmental organisations to submit for projects so that we can work on this biodiversity challenge and climate change, and also create jobs, we hope, in this field, but consolidate some jobs already there, but also we want to create more jobs. I'm really conscious that in order to deliver this exciting, much needed new step change, we actually need an army of people with knowledge as well in ecology, botany, biology, soil science, all of those things too. So we're hopeful that there will be some education links or apprenticeships connected to this, so we can get a whole wealth of new people in from right across the board to help on this agenda. I do sort of sometimes laugh with my team. When I came out of university, which is a long time ago, I trained in the environment, but when I came out of university, there were absolutely no jobs. This is a long time ago. There was something of a recession. And actually at that time, a whole load of posts were created in the countryside in the environment. And that's how I first got my first job, was on a government job. So, and that got new people into the environment. And I think, you know, through this new fund, we could help to do that. So I think it's going to open up lots of opportunities.
Great, thank you, Minister. I think one of the things that's come through through the webinar is that local organisers are working for free, doing amazing work and exactly what we need to happen. But it's all unfunded, and especially in areas where, you know, of areas of deprivation and you know, BAME communities. There's so much brilliant stuff going on, but they need the funding. So I think what we'll make sure we do is, there's been a bunch of questions that have been posted in the chat. And suggestions, and sort of there's definitely a sort of sense of what the community organisations definitely need to receive the help that they need. So we'll make sure that you receive that, and you can hopefully respond to that and bring that into your planning.
That would be really helpful if you could do that. And I know so many bodies are doing really brilliant work linking into current projects or setting up their own projects. So please do pass on those thoughts and views. That would be very helpful.
Thank you very much for your time and for everyone's time and for the panellists. And I'd really like to be able to continue this Q&A and develop this discussion further. But that's broadly most of the time that we have. So I'm going to bring back to Lorna, who's going to wrap up the webinar and say thank you to everyone.
Absolutely. So it remains for me to say a huge thank you to all of our brilliant panellists for speaking so eloquently to the central importance of community climate action as we recover from the COVID crisis. The Minister mentioned COP26 and of course London Climate Action Week, and this event is part of that festival, is all about drumming up conversation around climate in the run-up to COP next year. So thanks for making community action a central part of that conversation. And of course, we've had a wonderful group of attendees asking brilliant questions. A couple have asked about the recording of this event, and that will be sent out in an email next week, along with a sort of roundup of some of the key areas discussed over the past hour and a half. It would be brilliant if we could keep going. There are more questions to pose to all of our panellists. But I will wrap up here and say have a wonderful last day of London Climate Action Week, and do get in touch with us at Semble with any other questions that you might have.